Welcome to Convocation. We are really excited to welcome today Natalie Lovell, who is with Zero Fatalities. Let me tell you a little bit about Natalie. She is a proud Badger, having attended Snow College. Let's hear it. That's right. Very good. Okay. She also has a bachelor's degree from Utah State University and a master's degree in communication, right, from Southern Utah University. She comes from the events, outreach, and marketing fields, and she helps manage the outreach for Zero Fatalities. She has given over 700 parent night and truck smart presentations across Utah, and she has a passion for people and keeping them alive. Please welcome Natalie Lovell to the stage.
All right, how we doing today, Badgers? Okay, that's a little weak. God, come on, SCB, you need to give me a little more than that. How we doing, Snow College? Okay, there we go. That's, still not to a 10, but we're getting a little bit higher there. Well, like she said, I am actually really happy to be here with you guys today, both because I'm very passionate about Zero Fatalities, but also because I'm a Badger, like she said. I was here like 12 years ago, though, and the campus has changed a lot. I cannot believe how much Ephraim is growing and how much is being added to the campus, but I'm pumped to be back here, especially because this will be the first time I've actually presented at Snow College. As she mentioned, me and Laurie's here with me. She's on my team. We present statewide with these. We go to businesses and schools, and this is my first time back at Snow College, so I'm pumped to be here with you guys. Now, to start off, how many of you have heard of Zero Fatalities? Raise your hand for me. How many of you saw a parent night when you were in high school? Anybody seen one of those? We got a few hands. All right, well, where have you heard of us? Go ahead and shout out for me. Like, where have you seen us or heard us? Shout it out. Billboards, freeway, where else? Posters, okay? Maybe you've seen our fun commercials. We'll start with one of these. Maybe you can even relate to some of the things in this commercial.
It's hard enough to text and walk at the same time. Don't even think about texting and driving. Put your cell phone away in the car.
So I think we can all relate to something in that video, if not multiple things, right? I unfortunately have walked into way too many things on my cell phone, or while on my cell phone, right? But like we said, we're trying to get these messages out here everywhere that we can. But you may have seen our commercials or billboards or on social media. We're a UDOT and DPS program. And I want to start off tonight just by talking about the name of our program. Okay, we've been around for years now, and we named it Zero Fatalities because we don't want to lose any more lives out on our roads. Now, with that being said, raise your hands for me. How many of you think that Zero Fatalities is possible? How many of you think that we can get there? Okay, I've got my couple hands, my couple believers. Okay, this is usually about what I see, especially a group like this. I usually only see a couple hands go in the air. Okay, a couple of years ago, we actually went out on the streets with a microphone, and we asked people, we said, hey, do you think we can get to zero? And what do you think they said? Yeah, just like almost all of you in here, they were like, no way. Like, that is so unrealistic to get to zero as an entire state. So then we asked them, we said, okay, well, what do you think the goal should be then? And we got a lot of answers. We got, well, if you could cut it in half from the year before, that'd be pretty good. Or if you could get it under 100 or even one less life from the year before. So then we asked them, okay, well, those are pretty good goals, but how many of those fatalities are we going to take from your family then? And of course, what do you think they told us? They told us zero, because if I were to ask you with an obvious question with an obvious answer what the goal for your family is, what would you tell me? It's zero, right? Zero is the goal for my family. Zero is the goal for your family. So why wouldn't it be the goal for the entire state, right? And that's all we want you to do today is to focus on your inner circle, your friends, your family. And as we all do that, we can get there as an entire state. Okay, let's take a look at how we're doing out on our roads. Let's take a look at some numbers. Behind each one of these numbers, of course, is a life. But let's look at these numbers. Okay, in 2019, we had 248 fatalities out on our roads. That's a lot. That's way too many. Moving on from 2019 to 2020, do you think it went up or do you think it went down? What do you guys think? Okay, I have a lot of optimistic people. Remember the number 248. We jumped up to 276 in 2020. That's a pretty big jump. Okay, 2020 to 2021. Do you think we went up or do you think we went down? Okay, I've still got some optimistic people, and I like that. Remember 276, we jumped up to 328 fatalities in 2021. Now, 2022, we're still kind of finalizing numbers, but it's the same thing. These are big jumps, right? I've been with the program long enough that about, 7 or 8 years ago, believe it or not, Utah actually started to see fatalities go down. Year after year, we were in the right direction. We were decreasing, going down. Well, 2020 hit, and it was a rough year for a lot of reasons. But traffic fatalities were one of those. Since then, we have seen drastic jumps these last couple years, and UDOT is worried. I mean, that's one reason we're here today, because there is something that we have to be doing out on these roads. We've got to do something about this, and these things hit close to home too, right? We know that Snow College has had a recent fatality, a recent tragedy out on the roads. Many of you may have known Paige, and these tragedies, these numbers are more than just numbers, right? They hit close to home and they're real, and that's why we're here determined to change that here today at Convocations. Okay? We want to jump into just a little bit of what we call the 5 behaviors. So in other words, most of these crashes out on the roads are choices that we're making behind the wheel, right? Not often are they accidents. We hate the word accident. We call them crashes because more often than not, they're choices that we make behind the wheel. So these are the 5 behaviors that we focus on in Utah. We have driving focused, looking at distractions, driving calm, looking at aggressive behaviors, driving sober, driving alert, looking at drowsy driving, and then driving buckled. Now, if we had a little bit more time, I would jump through all 5 of these behaviors, but today we're just going to look at 3 of them. We're going to talk about driving focused, driving alert, and driving buckled. I know it's seatbelt week, I think, in this area, so we're going to finish up with my favorite seatbelts. But looking at these 5 behaviors, like I said, these are what we try to focus on to make behavior change out on our roads. Now, I will say before we jump into things that I will be sharing some upsetting stories today. We do not share these stories with the intent to upset you and to scare you from driving or anything like that. We share them with the opposite reason, to empower us and to learn from these tragedies that have happened on our roads, right? To understand that they don't have to happen to us and that we can make those correct decisions. All right, so let's start off with driving focused. Now, like I said, we're talking about distractions with driving focused, so shout out for me. When I say distracted driving, what are some distractions you see out on the roads? Texting? What else? You guys are a quiet bunch. What else do you guys see out on the roads? Music. Yes, what else? Phones. What else did we hear? Okay, a lot of different things inside and outside the car. What else? Kids. Did I hear that right? Kids are passengers. That's a big one. Anybody seen any just crazy distractions that you're like, I cannot believe that I'm seeing this right now, this driver? Makeup. We've totally seen makeup, right? Although usually it is a big burly gentleman who yells out makeup, I swear. But, okay, what else? Makeup. Anybody seen any other crazy ones? Yeah. Eating. The worst part I see in Utah is we love our sauces. So it's not even just eating. We've got a dip, right? Okay, eating's a big one. Yeah. How did they have power? Wow, that is impressive. Adding on to that, I've seen, believe it or not, girls painting not only their fingernails, but their toenails. I have no idea how they were managing to drive. But we see a lot of different crazy distractions out there, right? From cell phones to passengers to eating bowls of cereal. We see a lot of crazy things. Now, since cell phones are always the first thing we think of, let's start there. And I don't know how many of you have been in this situation. We'll start with a funny little commercial where you're driving down the road and you're mad at the car next to you because they're on their phone and you know they shouldn't be on their phone. And you're mad because you're never on your phone behind the wheel, right? Let's take a look at this little commercial here.
Hashtag idiot driver. Hashtag learn to drive.
Don't be a phony. Put your cell phone away when you're driving.
I heard somebody yell, oh my gosh, right? I think we all, even if you don't want to admit, I think we've all can relate to that at some point where we're mad at other people on their phones, but we could probably be a little bit better ourselves. Now, I do want you to think for just a second about cell phone use behind the wheel. Am I wrong, unfortunately, in saying that cell phones have kind of become the norm behind the wheel? Am I wrong in saying that? right? I don't know about you guys, but at least I feel like every time I go and get in my car, I'm gonna see somebody on their phone at some point on that drive. How many of you feel that way? If not multiple people, I see a lot of hands going up, right? Unfortunately, this has just kind of become accepted as normal, even though we're driving this 3,000 to 4,000 pound vehicle. You know, there may be some of you in this room that are really good at not using your phone behind the wheel, and I commend you for that because that's not very common. But based off what I see, I'm going to assume that's not very many of us. So I want to ask you a question that I just want you to think about, right? Don't shout out your answer, but just think, what are your reasons that you've used your phone behind the wheel, or that you do use it? Maybe you're responding to emails for school, maybe you're shopping, maybe you're responding to a group chat or a text message, or you're bored. What are your reasons for having your phone out behind the wheel? I want you to think about those, and let's take a look at this story about JC.
So as a story, I just confess that I text and drive.
If I get a text, I look at my phone.
It's definitely texting.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Snapchat. I do Snapchat and drive sometimes.
Is that like making Snapchats or watching them?
Making them.
Texting is like my main form of communication.
Boredom, honestly.
And B, well, nah, I guess no, it's really just A.
I've only never done it at stoplights. I've always been really good about it.
The passenger has a pretty important role driving now, where they're like, oh, red light, red light.
If someone that you like texts you, you're like, you can't just like let it sit there without just knowing what they said.
Because what if something exciting's happening or something happened?
Like, every time I do it, I think about it. I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I just keep doing it.
So I'd like to, want to introduce you to a friend of ours.
My name is JC.
Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Dash.
Justin, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I just really quickly want to have a chat, tell you what happened to me. When I was 21 years old, driving home from my college graduation ceremony, driver on his phone was so distracted. He turned left into the intersection at a red light. Another car, an 18-wheeler, swerved to miss him and hit my family's car. And the resulting collision actually killed both of my parents. I spent 2 months in the hospital fighting for my own life, and then 2 more months in a rehab hospital, learning how to walk again, learning how to speak again, learning how to dress myself and how to feed myself. I live with a partially paralyzed body. I didn't have my daddy to walk me down the aisle when I got married.
Having sort of like met JC, because you look at JC and sort of give those same reasons.
Usually I use my phone to change a song on. I try to use it as little as possible, but
I'm not gonna look at my phone ever again.
Honestly, if I have been sitting at a red light, I'll like glance down to see if my mom's texting me, but the people's lives that are impacted from something that is so stupid.
I can assure you on my drive home right now, I'm not going to use my phone and drive, and I'm not going to do it when I go to work tomorrow and the next day after that until, it becomes a habit, and that just doesn't happen at all.
I know this is hard, and I'm sorry, it's hard for me too, but this is real. You know, the power to really actually make a difference and do something about it.
Thank you.
I think that's an incredibly impactful story. I think sometimes it's so easy to get caught up and, come on, it's just a quick text message, or it's just this, or it's just that. And oftentimes people have done it so many times, nothing's happened to that point. But there really is no good reason to have our phone out. You know, there is no text message or phone call or Snapchat or TikTok or email or whatever that's going to be worth what can happen when we have our phones out behind the wheel. And this is a cultural shift, right? We need to make this change as a culture, but we have the power in our car when we're behind the wheel to make sure something like that doesn't happen to us, or that we're not causing something like that. We can change this. You know, it's been proven that texting and driving is as dangerous as driving under twice the legal limit of alcohol. We've got to be better, and we've just got to put the phones to the side when we're behind the wheel. Now, although cell phones and texting are very big distractions out on our roads, distractions can be as simple as picking up a water bottle that you just dropped or a chapstick. Okay, so things as simple as that. Let's take a look at this next story about Bailey. And there's a little quiz for you with this one. There are 3 drivers involved. At the end, I want you to pay attention to how many were distracted.
As a little girl, Bailey wore Halloween costumes all year long. That was her thing. Halloween was her favorite time of year. She was spunky and feisty. Bailey, she loved to be around people. From the moment I found out I was pregnant with her, my whole life changed. She changed me, and I loved her so much. So it was January 11th, 2016. It was a Monday morning. My husband had dropped Bailey off at school that morning. Her and her friend had decided that they were gonna go and get Frappuccinos. They had been at school, had about a half an hour before school was gonna start, so they had plenty of time. They were walking across the crosswalk. The cars on the west side of the road had stopped for them. They saw the truck pull out of the Gold's Gym parking lot and thought, you know, we have plenty of time, he sees us. He had leaned over to grab a shaker bottle and did not have his eyes on the road and hit my daughter and her friend. Her friend went to the side of the road, the east side of the road, and my daughter was left in the middle of the road. The second car was paying attention and pulled over into the medium and stopped. The third car was not. She was talking to her passenger, and she said that she saw what she thought was laundry in the road, so she chose to center it on her. After she centered it on her, she continued to drive my daughter over 50 yards down the road. I had somebody calling me. My ringer was actually off on my phone, and there was a phone call, and it was a blocked number, which I normally would not answer. So I answered, and it told me, you know, this is Layton City Police Department. I don't remember what his name was. He said, your daughter has been involved in an auto pedestrian accident. It's very, very serious. And everybody says it's not gonna happen to me. If you would have asked me a couple years ago, I would say, not my little girl. She wouldn't be hit. Nobody should have to go through that. No family should have to go through that over something as little as pulling over and parking your car instead of taking your eyes off the road when you're driving.
By far, the hardest part of my job is working with families like Bailey's who have lost a teen specifically out on our roads. You know, it's heartbreaking, and that's why we go statewide with these presentations to businesses and schools, because when we look at Bailey's tragedy, was that preventable? Absolutely, that was preventable with the distracted drivers, right? And there's something even more pertinent with Bailey being on a college campus. She wasn't a college campus, but I'm saying with you guys, pedestrians are a very big thing around campus, right? Most people walk everywhere. You walk in between classes. People live close to campus. And, you know, pedestrian fatalities are huge recently. I don't know how often you guys pay attention to the news. I know I didn't in college, but maybe you guys are better than me. Pedestrian fatalities are just enormously out the wall right now, and we've got to do something. You know, those crosswalks that are out there, we've got to make sure that as we are driving around campus, we're paying attention for those that are using the crosswalk. And those who are walking, we've got to make sure that we're looking and that we're not distracted on our phone as we step out into the street or different things. So it's definitely both sides, but you know, we're determined to change this, and these are preventable. So At the end of each section, we've got some tips that we're going to jump into. Again, things that we can do out on the road as drivers to make sure this doesn't happen to us. So, number one for driving focus. We want to, it's simple. Focus on our driving. We think we're really good at multitasking these days, right? Well, I'm driving, I'm going to respond to emails, I'm going to do this. No, we have one job. It's not to respond to email, it's not even to change the radio, it's to drive. So focus on that task at hand. Okay, next up here, driver rule, no phone, period. Now, I am under no impression, I'm not naive enough to think that everybody's going to throw their phone in their trunk when they're driving. But do as much as you can before you hit the road. Set up your maps before you go. Turn on your playlist or whatever before you hit go. Put that do not disturb while driving mode on so you're not getting notified of all the text or whatever blowing up your phone. But there are things that we can do to put that phone down. Okay, next up here, never reach for anything in the car. Just like we saw in Bailey's story, if it's something you need that badly at that second, then pull over, but otherwise it can wait. Now, circling back to Bailey's story is quiz time. There were 3 drivers in her story. Show me or yell out how many were distracted. See a lot of peace signs here, a couple people yelling it, right? 2 drivers, 2 of the 3. The first driver was picking up his protein bottle. The second driver was paying attention. And the third driver was what? Talking to passengers, okay? It's my belief that passengers are either a help to the driver or a distraction to the driver. You know, you look at Bailey's story, and this isn't me placing blame on any one person, but the passengers could have been a help. Oh my gosh, what is that there in the road? We need to pull over. Instead, they were distracting and goofing off and not paying attention to the road. You know, be the designated texter. Don't get your driver all riled up and goofing off, but we can do a little bit better job at that. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into our next behavior, which is driving alert. Now, this is looking at drowsy driving. And I doubt times have changed too much in college since I was in school a few years ago. I hardly got any sleep when I was in college. In fact, I remember at snow specifically on Fridays, I would go home and take a nap so that I could stay up and goof off and get into whatever ruckus around here with my friends. I hardly got any sleep. I'm assuming it's the same, and it's not even just for partying and fun, but with the jobs that you guys are doing while you're in school and with those homework and those research papers, college students don't get a lot of sleep. Now, how many of you are familiar with those little head bobs? Everybody know what I'm talking about? Hopefully not having those today, right? I'm sure you've all had those maybe in class sometime or a meeting. Those little head bobs are what we call micro sleep. So on average, your eyes are shut for 3 to 4 seconds, and you're going to be asleep. It could be longer, obviously, right? Well, 3 to 4 seconds may not be a big deal in a class at school or something, but out on one of these main roads going through different towns and stuff, is 3 to 4 seconds a big deal? Absolutely, it's a big deal. You're going to be asleep for over the length of a football field driving down the road. Not even including the reaction time to wake up and react to anything, but you're going to be asleep for that long. Now, a lot of times, people associate drowsy driving with long road trips, right? Oh, I only have to worry about this when we're driving to California or whatever. No, this is for every day. We've unfortunately worked with too many families who have lost, for example, a teenager going to early morning drill practice at 6 a.m. just a couple miles from home, similar to situations here, and she fell asleep at the wheel. This is every day that we've got to make sure that we're catching that beauty rest. Drowsy driving is often compared to drunk driving, impaired driving. People don't think of them on the same level because drowsy driving is so mundane, right? Like, how often are you tired? It's okay if you say all the time, right? We know you have a lot going on, but we don't think about it because it's just so mundane, but they are very similar reactions, right? You're going to have a slower reaction time. You're going to have an inconsistent speed. You'll be swerving in and out of your lane. So it is something that we do need to take just a little bit more seriously. Now, let's take a look at these head bobs. This is a taxi cab driver, and I want you to look at his eyes. Now, he's not buckled up. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But look at his eyes. He's kind of going in and out, and right about now, he goes out for about 2 seconds, and he swerves off the road and overcorrects into a cement barrier. Now, fortunately, he was okay, and fortunately, nobody else was in the car, but did you see how quickly that was? He barely started to nod off when he was swerving off the road and losing control of the car like that. A lot can happen in just a couple seconds. Now, on the other side of that coin, I want you to also look at how long it takes our bodies to wake up from one of these head bobs and react to something. This was a student headed up to BYU, Idaho. Boo, right? BYU, Idaho, though, college student, he was heading up there one day, and these guardrails right here are designed to keep us on the road. Well, this student, and they typically do a pretty good job at that, but this BYUI student happened to hit it at just the wrong spot when they were driving a little drowsy. Now, thank goodness nobody else was in the car with them and they were okay, right? Can you imagine if there were passengers in the back seat or that front seat? Thank goodness, but I want you to look at how long it took him to wake up, come to, hit the brakes, and that car to come to a stop. Now, this is just kind of one of those freak things, but look at all that guardrail that went through and all that distance by the time that Suburban was able to come to a stop. Our bodies need sleep. I cannot emphasize that. Now, I want to share a story with you, and this one actually hits, again, a little bit more close to home because this is about another college student here in Utah. This was a few years ago, and I'm going to let them tell their story themselves, but this is about Maddie. And unfortunately, her life was taken. She was in college along with her brother and his fiance. And they decided one time, they'll hear a little bit more about their story, but that they wanted to just make it home for Thanksgiving break. You know, we're college students. We're used to staying up late, pulling all-nighters. It's fine. Let's drive home, make it home early to surprise our families. Well, unfortunately, because of that decision, Maddie lost her life that day. And I'll go ahead and let them tell their story a little bit further.
I'm Taylor Morris. And 2 years ago, I learned a valuable lesson in the dangers of drowsy driving. I fell asleep at the wheel, and that resulted in the death of my little sister, Maddie. My little sister, Maddie, got accepted to BYU and joined as a student. Bailey and I happened to meet that summer here at BYU while working as counselors at a summer camp. And we started dating, quickly fell in love, and with Maddie up here as a student also, we decided we'd all travel down together to Arizona for Thanksgiving. And so we all packed up the car, decided to drive through the night so we could get there and enjoy our vacation. We both felt alert and awake. We were used to pulling all-nighters as college students do. And it was about 2 a.m. when we finally hit the road, and about 4 hours later when the car accident happened. Neither one of us thought there was really any risk at all. It never occurred to any of us in the car that this would be a dangerous thing.
We thought we were really prepared for the drive. We had lots of snacks and drinks and music.
Bailey was in the passenger seat, I was driving, but we were still actively talking to each other the whole time to make sure that both of us were awake, and as long as we were engaged in conversation, how could either one of us fall asleep, let alone both of us? About 4 hours into the drive at 6 a.m., I fell asleep at the wheel, and with cruise control set, we veered off the road, hit a ramp, launched into the air, and landed headfirst, and then flipped upside down.
The next thing I remember was having a conversation with Taylor, and then waking up to a scream from Maddie in the back, and there was a ramp on the side of the road that we were approaching. And I looked at Taylor, and he was eyes all of a sudden wide open, and we hit, and then I just heard glass shatter, and then it was just quiet. Finally, the ambulance came, and they drove me to the Kanab hospital where they were taking Taylor, and they wouldn't let me see him. They took me straight in to get tested and saw that I was fine, and then told me that Maddie had died.
You know, like they said, they were college students. They were used to staying up late and pulling all-nighters. They had snacks. They were talking to each other. I can't think of anything personally that would keep me more awake than being actively engaged in a conversation with another person, yet both of them fell asleep. You know, just remember that as you're going home for holiday weekends, even just as you're driving around town here in Ephraim, if you're a little tired, don't get behind the wheel. Catch a ride with somebody else. Go catch a nap. But these are things that we can prevent behind the wheel out there. Now, let's go ahead and jump into some more of those tips. Okay, first, beauty rest. I cannot emphasize that enough. It has been proven that if you get less than 6 hours of sleep, you are actually 3 times more likely to get in a crash. So we can't underestimate that. You know, our bodies can get into very intense biological rhythms that sometimes we just can't beat. And this actually is the only thing that's going to wake your body up. You know, oftentimes we rely on snacks or rolling the window down, turning up the AC, turning up the radio. Those things may wake your body up for a second, but they don't actually wake your body up. Same thing with caffeine or energy drinks. What happens after the high on caffeine? Then we hit the crash. You know, we don't want an actual crash on the roads, and we don't want to rely on those things. Beauty, rest, sleep is the only thing that we really want to make sure that we are relying on. Now, these next ones up here are a little bit more for those longer trips. Switch drivers sooner than later. You know, if you're feeling tired, don't wait till you can't make it anymore. You think you're close to your destination anyways. No, if you're feeling tired, switch it up with somebody else in the car who's not tired. Don't wait until the last second or it's too late. Okay, next, do things that'll actually wake your body up. So in other words, if you are on a road trip or maybe you're driving home for a weekend or something like that, stop every so many miles or so many minutes and get out of the car, stretch, walk around, get a bite to eat, get some blood flowing. But again, do things that'll actually wake your body up. Don't just pull over in a truck stop or at a gas station and scroll through TikTok for 15 minutes. That's not going to help. That's going to make it worse, right? And last up here, we want to make sure that we're listening to our body and even pulling off the road and taking a nap if we need to. You know, for my job, I live and work in Salt Lake City, but we go statewide with this presentation and with this program. And sometimes after a day of work, I'll head up to Cache Valley, Logan area, which isn't that far. It's only like an hour and a half from Salt Lake for a presentation. And there have been a handful of times where I have to pull off the road and take a 20-minute power nap. Now, I know my body, and I also know that works for me. I'm feeling a little tired. I pull over, tilt my seat back, take a 20-minute power nap. Again, I know that works for me. You may need a longer nap. You may need to get a hotel. Maybe there's sometimes you just shouldn't be getting behind the wheel. But again, the biggest thing with making sure that we're driving alert is knowing our body and listening to our bodies. We don't want to chance it when we're driving these 3,000 to 4,000 pound vehicles. Okay, let's jump into our last behavior today. And this one is one of my favorites, right? Driving buckled. Now, raise of hands, how many of you are good at wearing your seatbelt? Like every time you get in the car, you click that little buckle. I hope I see every hand start going up. Okay. Here in Utah, we have a primary seatbelt law. So what this means is an officer needs no other reason to pull you over than you not being buckled. Now, we at Zero Fatalities, we love this law because we know that seatbelts save lives. You know, we see it every day. The stories that come in of people who should have had their seatbelts on and the stories come in of people who were saved by their belt. I don't know about you guys, but I still have people in my life who, even with me being the seatbelt police, still do not buckle up. We'll be in the car or doing something, and they're, oh, I don't need my seatbelt. I'm like, no, get it on. But I still have people that won't wear it. I don't know about you, but they have the weirdest excuses, and we're going to talk through some of those excuses just as we finish up today. Now, the first excuse that I will hear people say is, well, come on. You can choose to wear your seatbelt, but you can't make that decision for me, and me not wearing my seatbelt doesn't even affect you. Okay, let's take a look at this, and I will warn you, this one is a little bit more graphic.
This is Michael. Today, he's going to hit his girlfriend so hard, she ends up with permanent brain damage.
Three dead in this vehicle. The girl is critical. They say the guy without the seatbelt did the damage.
No seatbelt, no excuse. From DOE.
Now that is a European commercial, right? But we have a little bit different standard here. But it does a really good job at illustrating that point. Raise of hands, how many of you had thought of seatbelts in that way before? Okay, a few people in here. I'll be honest, before I started working with Zero Fatalities years ago, I never thought of seatbelts like that. It was like, okay, I wear my seatbelt and you do you make your own choices. But no, you wear your seatbelt for every single person in that car, or you then become the flying projectile that could kill or injure somebody. In fact, statistically, if every single person in the car has their seatbelt on except one, that one person will then increase the risk of death or injury to everybody in that car by 40%. So we don't even just wear it for ourselves. Okay, let's jump into this next one. I want you to think back to our taxi cab driver. Now, I'm not going to play the video again, but thinking back, if you were a passenger in that car, would he have hit you? Absolutely. Would you be okay? Probably not. I mean, he's a big dude, but even so, let's look at some simple physics, okay? You need to multiply your weight by your speed to equal the amount of restraining force to hold you down in a crash. So simple example, if you weigh 130 pounds and you're traveling at 60 miles per hour, you will then need nearly 8,000 pounds to hold you down from moving around in that crash. So this excuse actually used to come from my father. I'd be driving around with my dad, and I'm like, Dad, come on, get your seatbelt on. Oh, come on, I'm a big dude. If we get in a crash, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, he needs to think again, and he now wears his seatbelt. I wonder why, right? Same thing with, we work with a lot of guys who will say, oh, I'm strong, I can hold myself there. I would love to see you bench press 8,000 pounds. There's a lot of force moving around in that vehicle. Okay, let's look at this simulated rollover. Whoops, something just jumped ahead of you on me. Well, a lot of you. Let's go back to that simulated rollover. There we go. So this is 6 dummies, average weight, average size. You'll notice the dummies do not decide where they fly, where they go, how hard, how far. You'll notice this very first dummy that's ejected right here is the last, right here, there we go, is the last dummy to land. One of the dummies is ejected from the vehicle rolls over the dummy, and it's thrown back into the vehicle. You know, these dummies are out of control. They're flying all over the place. First off, you don't land on a pillow. 75% of the time, you will die from your injuries if you are ejected from the vehicle, statistically speaking. There's that first dummy that was ejected. As I say, that airbag and that seatbelt are designed to restrain us. Now, I want to share one more story with you guys today, and the excuse in this story is actually the one that I relate to most in this entire presentation, because I used to use this excuse all the time when I was both in high school and when I was in college. Well, come on, we're not going that far. Like, we're not even going that fast. We're literally just going right around the corner. Why do I need my seatbelt? This is about Chelsea Hill and her best friend, Jamie. They were best friends since they were yay high. Out one night, regular Friday night, Jamie was driving and Chelsea was in the passenger seat unbuckled. They were going 3 miles from home at 5 miles per hour. They were hit from behind, which caused the vehicle to roll once. Chelsea was ejected out of the sunroof that night. 3 miles from home, 5 miles per hour. There's no reason why we should not have those seatbelts on, especially, like I said, in a small town like this. I get that. I was back here for that. Okay, tips for driving buckled. Number 1, everyone buckles up in the car every ride for the entire ride. There are no excuses or exceptions to this rule. Next step here, we want to make sure we're using the seatbelt correctly. So our seatbelts are designed to sit on our strong bones, so shoulder to hip to hip. If we take that shoulder strap and put it behind our back, we could break our back. If we put it under our arm, we're now creating a new pivot point right along our vital organs. We know they can't stand that force like our strong bones can. So shoulder to hip to hip. Same thing with those airbags. If you put your feet on that dashboard and that airbag flies out at how many miles per hour, where are your knees going? We need to make sure that we're using them correctly. Okay, next step here, make it your rule. Right? You're the one responsible for everybody in your car when you're driving. So make it your rule that your car doesn't move until everyone's got that seatbelt on. And last step here, speak up as a passenger. Speak up in any of these situations. If your friend has their phone out and they're driving, grab it from them and say you'll send the text message. If your friend doesn't have their seatbelt on, smack them a little bit and tell them to put it on, because we know these things will not only affect us, but we do want our friends and family safe out there. So just remember, you know, as we're talking about, these things can be prevented. That's why we're here. That's why we go statewide with this program to change these things in Utah. Hopefully that these tragedies won't continue to happen, especially on the Snow College campus. You know, it's easy to say, oh, I'm just going to quickly send this one text message, or, well, I don't need my seatbelt this one time. We've got to change that mentality and make those choices and make zero fatalities our goal every single time we get behind the wheel. Now, I'm super grateful to be here with you guys today. I know Cheryl wanted to open it up to a little bit of Q&A at the end here. So, Cheryl, I don't know if you want to do that now. I've also got Laurie here. Laurie knows even more than I do.
Old lady walking.
How did you get involved in a program like this? Like, how did you come to get to your position, I'd say?
Well, I have a background in communication, and I've always enjoyed kind of the community outreach side of things. I don't know if we have any people going into communication here. I majored in PR, but I really liked the community side of things is how I got into it. I don't know if there was really a story for me that got me into it. Laurie, we should have you tell your story of how you got involved. For me, I had just seen the job posting and got involved, and now, honestly, it makes it really hard for me to even look at other jobs because a lot of other jobs just look boring to me now, meaning I love being involved in traffic safety. Laurie, how many lives in your life have you lost from a traffic crash? 23, Laurie. So Laurie and I both work on the Zero Fatalities team. She's here with me. She actually lives in Richfield, so not too far from you guys. But she's had 23 lives in her life that have been taken from a traffic fatality. So she is extremely passionate on personal levels. I'm just more passionate about it just because I've seen it. Now that I've gotten into it, I wasn't a traffic safety nerd before I got involved in this. And now that I'm in it, seatbelt Nazi. Does that answer that? Laurie, I don't know if you have anything you'd want to add to that. That's a good question. We do honestly have a lot of families who have been affected by this who will want to be involved too. We actually have a Spanish speaker who his daughter unfortunately was taken, I think it's this year is 11 years when she was taken in a traffic fatality, and so he actually goes and presents and shares the same message in his story statewide to Spanish audiences. So we do have a lot of families who actually want to get involved and share their story and do videos and do different things. Because it's hard. I'm sure, I mean, if I were to ask how many people in this room have been affected or know somebody who's been affected by a traffic fatality, I'm sure it would be most, if not close to all people in this room. So it's a great question. And if anybody does want to get involved, come up and talk to me after. Or Laurie. We would love to be more involved even just on Snow College campus. Colleges are something that the program is really passionate about getting more into. So if there are ways or people who are champions on this campus, we'd love to talk to you afterwards. So good question.
I wonder if you have these stats ready. I'm a math teacher here. What percentage of the fatalities are due to distracted driving, to drowsy driving?
I'm trying to remember. It kind of changes. Do you know the most recent stats? I'm trying to remember, Laurie. Laurie and I both work on the numbers. While she's doing that, I'll kind of add to that thought while she's getting the mic. They're hard to collect because they're underreported, right? When an officer pulls, unless they physically see somebody on their phone, how often are people going to admit, oh, I got in this crash because, hey, I was texting or I was on my phone? So distracted in particular, they're really underreported and really hard to actually pull accurate statistics from. But Laurie can talk more about this as we work with officers. I mean, we all know it. We see it every day, all the distractions out there.
Distracted is probably not the highest reported, but I believe it's probably 1 or 2. The statistics show that in the past 2 years, it has been speed combined with drug or alcohol use that are our number 1 killers on the road. Number 3 is no seatbelt. And then, but I think distracted's probably up there with it.
That's a great question, and that's not even just the last 2 years. From my experience of the program, it's typically speed or aggressive, and then impaired, and then distracted, and then buckle up is usually in the middle there, with drowsy at the bottom.
Because it's underreported. You can talk to any police officer that's in traffic patrol, and they'll tell you that they can't report it unless they actually saw it or the person admits to it. So.
That's a good question. And we do have, if anybody is interested, if you're interested in more numbers, on our website, we call it our dashboard, all the statistics from the past 6 or 7 years. If you can see them by behavior, you can see it pedestrian, you can see all sorts of different things that are just, and it gets updated daily, actually.
So far this year, 1/3 of our fatalities have been pedestrian. For whatever reason, pedestrian is on a rise last year, and this year's looking even worse than last year.
Which is weird, because who was out walking in January?
How are crashes like affected by people like just checking their phone at a red light?
Well, it's what we call inattention blindness. So there's a whole theory and research on this, but inattention blindness, and Laurie would probably be able, you might be able to explain this a little bit better than I do. It's been a minute since I've talked about this. Inattention blindness, though, is where if we're distracted by something, very simply put, our brains don't pick up on all the details. So if I'm looking down in my lap at my phone and the light turns green, when I look up and hit the gas pedal, my brain will not pick up on maybe there's a bicyclist who's still crossing the road, or maybe the car in front of me hasn't even gone. That's kind of a more obvious one. But things like that, they've done studies where if you're looking, you pick up all X amount of details, but if you're looking up from something like that, it's called inattentive blindness, where we just don't pick up all of those details. and it takes us a second to actually cue back into what we were doing. And we call it switch tasking. A lot of people think that it's called multitasking, right? Where, hey, I'm doing emails and I'm driving and I'm listening to music and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, or even while we're doing homework. But it's actually called switch tasking. We've looked into research on that, where our brains can't physically do 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever things at the same time. We're actually switching back and forth. So you're switching from homework to texting your friend to doing this to doing that versus actually staying fully in on the one thing. So it's driving, it's the same thing. When you're going down to your phone, your brain is actually switching to texting, and then it has to fully switch back to go back to driving and pick up all the details. Laurie, I don't know if you have anything to add.
The number of crashes, not necessarily fatal crashes, happen in intersections. And we believe a lot of that is because people come to a stop, they believe that they can now focus on something else for a few seconds.
That's a great question. And I think that's so common too. A lot of people think, well, I'm at a red light, so I can do this. And there may be some truth to that, but it's still going to pull from your reaction time once you start going again. So that's a good question. Anybody else? There we go. We got one back there. You guys have good questions. I'm impressed. I'm used to dealing with high school students. They don't have good questions.
How do you go about, like, asking the victims, like, families, like, if it's, like, okay to, like, interview them, or, like, do they come to you to, like, help other people not drive?
Laurie, do you want to answer that one? I'll kind of switch it up. You guys have heard a lot from me. I'll let Laurie jump in here.
Sometimes they come to us. Sometimes they're court-ordered if the driver is court-ordered that caused the crash to come to us and do community service. Every year we put together a teen memoriam, and we actually reach out to all of the families of teenagers that died on our roads that year, and we send them a letter and ask them if they would mind helping us with our projects. You can go to our website and read our teen memoriams, and they're the stories that the families give us after we've reached out to them. Probably only a quarter of them do reach out and come back to us. It's hard. Natalie mentioned I've lost 23 friends and family members in crashes, and people heal differently. Some people heal by reaching out and trying to make something positive out of something bad. Other people keep it to themselves. So about a quarter of them will answer those requests.
It's a good question.
We're out of time now. We want to thank Natalie and Laurie for coming to visit with us. Please give them another hand. They did bring some helpful reminders, some swag. If you would like to grab a lip balm, right?
It's pina colada. It's always 5 o'clock summer when you're doing homework.
And a pen with the Zero Fatalities logo on it. They are at either door as you exit this room. Thank you so much for your attention today. We really appreciate it, and have a good weekend.